Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024 and the seventh season of the Racial Draft Podcast. I am your host, Michael Ford. Uh, we had some technical difficulties earlier in the day, so I am back on a little truncated basis just to give you a reintroduction to what we do here at the Racial Draft, where we change the complexion of the comic book universe one draft pick at a time. So yeah, I'm a little bit under the weather. You can probably hear it in my voice. A little bit slightly better than I was when I recorded the Lost episode, which will never reach the light of day. Those of you who saw the live stream, um, you saw how bad it was. So I'm back. Take two. But I'm going to talk about the new season, which is you know they I'll go ahead and reshare the draft order. Uh, the South Asian delegation has the first pick. The Polynesian delegation has the second pick. The Swana MENA delegation has the third pick. The fourth pick is the white delegation. The fifth pick is the multiracial delegation. Number 6, the East Southeast Asian delegation. Number 7, the Jewish delegation. Number 8, the Black delegation. Number 9, the Latinx delegation. And number 10, the turnaround, these defending champions, the Native American delegation. So that's the draft order. The South Asian delegation is on the clock. And as they are on the clock, I am going to talk about some possibilities for them as they decide who to pick with the very first pick. Last season, as I often mention, as previous seasons, Batman is a part of every delegation. So otherwise, he would be the number one pick in every season, if we're being honest. But because of that, to change that, to switch things around, we can kind of take Batman off the table. We'll let all the different delegations come up with their respective spins on the Batman of their particular race or ethnicity. But last year, the number one scoring character was Superman, and the number 2 scoring character was Spider-Man. Very, very chalky if we're thinking about where characters' sort of standing is in terms of being well-known, prominent, ubiquitous, all the things that kind of take into account how big a character is. Obviously, Superman last year had a TV show. He had an animated TV show as well. He's there's a movie in the works, so there's a lot of news surrounding that movie as well. He's in the zeitgeist, and he's been in the zeitgeist for at this point almost 100 years. Spider-Man on the Marvel side, he's definitely in the zeitgeist, and last year was no exception. Last year he had a video game. Shared. We'll talk about it a little later. He also had a film. We'll talk about that a little later. And in general, Sony really does a lot with the Spider-Man character. He's got countless appearances across media. He's not going away anytime soon. That is the Peter Parker incarnation. But that doesn't mean that the Miles Morales incarnation didn't have a great year as well. So, like I said, the first 2 scoring characters last season were Superman and Peter Parker. But number 8 was Miles Morales. Peter Parker was the number 5 pick, and Miles Morales was the number 13 pick last season. But in terms of points, they were pretty far apart actually. But still, Miles Morales had a very great year, considering where he was drafted. For sure. It does remain to be seen whether after having, again, a video game where he was co-lead with Peter Parker and a movie where he was the lead with Peter Parker as a supporting character, those things are not in the cards for him this year. He, of course, still has his comic, and that's been going well. A lot of people are enjoying that. He's still going to be prominent. The question is, will there be a little bit of a regression in this current season? That all remains to be seen, and that's part of the strategy of the racial draft. One of the things I wanted to mention, which I mentioned on the Lost episode, when we talk about these characters and the possibility of being drafted, obviously there's no rules. Well, there are rules, but there, anyone can draft anyone. However, there are certain components involved, and your ability to make the case is going to loom large in the scoring system. Your ability to help people see the vision of this character as racially drafted um, can affect strategy, can affect what you think the people, those of you who are listening right now, or those of you who will listen at a later point, you have the opportunity. The drafter has the opportunity to make the case, and listeners have the opportunity to give their feedback on these picks. And the feedback is important. If a pick really hits with people, particularly when it's a race bend, um, that's going to yield more points than making a pick that is unpopular. Um, but again, you do have time to make your case. You do have the ability to explain why you think, as a drafter, that this character would be enhanced, would be improved if he was, or she, sorry, I apologize, he, she, or they, were brought into the fray. Or obviously, maintaining a character in a certain way, you know, generally speaking, that tends to be more popular. But you still have the opportunity to make the case as to why it's very essential that this character kind of be as they are traditionally understood. Um, every now and then, you'll have a character who has been imagined in a number of ways. So in that sense, you get the opportunity as a drafter to figure out the primacy of it. You get to figure out whether, uh, in Catwoman, for instance, um, who who's the ideal Catwoman? Is it white Catwoman? Is it Latina Catwoman? Is it multiracial Catwoman? Is it black Catwoman? These are all part of kind of what goes into play when a character is being racially drafted, and the case that can be made by the drafter and by the delegation, and also the people kind of deciding which route which incarnation they might prefer. I don't want to completely recover the ground that I covered in the lost episode, but I do want to hit some touch points. Like I said, Joker and Harley Quinn, top five characters last season, which is amazing. And there's a Joker movie featuring Harley Quinn that's happening this year, so it's very possible that those characters stay prominent, even though it's a little controversial, given that their romance is sort of a bygone aspect of their characters, and it's something that a lot of Harley Quinn fans don't want to see fully revisited. Speaking of Harley Quinn romances, one of the bigger sleepers of the past season was, in fact, Poison Ivy, who was the 35th pick, but the 15th scoring character. And a lot of that had to do, I think, with her prominence both in comics with a solo book, and in her associated with Harley as part of the Harley Quinn animated series. I don't remember if that series is coming back in 2024, but in general, the Harley Ivy romance is something that resonates with a lot of people. And speaking specifically about Poison Ivy, though, I believe that's a character that is very well served in being portrayed by a woman of color, because of just how that character has been. Uh, hmm, the character herself has been misunderstood and subjected to both the male gaze and, in a lot of sense, the colonial gaze. So having a character that is so tied into wanting to preserve the earth and preserve nature and the environment, but being misunderstood both as a terrorist or as a villain, just for kind of fighting against these status quo ideologies. I just think that there are a lot more layers in having Poison Ivy be a woman of color, and a number of, I think, delegations could have a really good spin on Poison Ivy if they chose to go that direction. Um, Speaking of a character that is could go a number of directions. I suppose I should mention um, Wolverine. I think that there, while he is traditionally supposed to be a white guy, there are so many kind of aspects to the character that suggest that um, the more appropriate aspects of the character would be less problematic if he were somewhat either kind of multiracial or even this has come up in other years and been well received. Logan being Native American and some of the struggles, some of the things that he's gone through, kind of being the result of being dehumanized as a non-white person, particularly in Canada, where First Nations children were were mistreated, and you know, not to fully stereotype, but his connection to nature and the animals, and just kind of having an affinity with certain tribes, as it were, tribes and nations um, throughout his past. I think that there's a lot of resonance and a lot of room for Logan conceptualized as Native American, and I think that in general, it's been he's been very well received in that race band, and I think that that's the kind of thing that I would hope continues, though perhaps not with the Native American delegation. We'll see. We'll see. This is just me throwing out kind of how things went in the previous season and how things might potentially go in the upcoming season. Who else? I'm not going to go character by character, but I do want to mention that when we're dealing with other X-Men characters, one of which I will mention right now, Storm. That is definitely a character who the Black delegation should feel some obligation to protect and maintain. I think that she's the preeminent Black female character in comics, definitely in Marvel, but I think in all comics. I think that um, to the extent that she's had to maintain that position, there are so many Black women who are fans of the genre who see themselves in Storm, and I think that that's why it would be really important for the Black delegation to make sure that Storm stays home. I think that other delegations would be dealing with a lot of backlash, if we're being honest, if they attempted to appropriate Storm and make her something other than Black. Um, you know, not sorry. Similarly, that's where I was looking for. Similarly, you could say the same for T'Challa, Black Panther, obviously, or anyone from Wakanda. As I've if this is your first go around with us, we do have a challenge system. So if you know if a character is drafted in such a way that is so egregious, the delegation that wants to mount a challenge that uh, has the ability to make the case that the character would be so adversely affected by being racially drafted in that fashion that that pick should be blocked. The risk, of course, in submitting a challenge is that you may forfeit your pick if you submit a challenge, an unsuccessful challenge. Sorry, but of course, if you are successful, then you not only block the character, but you receive the character for your delegation. So there are benefits to doing a challenge for sure. Um, what else? We can talk about Wonder Woman. One of the things that I said about Wonder Woman is I do think that because of her magical background, she can definitely be something other than white. But because of her origin and because of how closely her origin is tied to America, both in the World Wars and in the present day, the American War Machine, I think that her being at least white passing or within the parameters of the Western beauty standards is important to kind of the credulity of her character. So while the further she gets from that, the more I think that she would have to account for the racism alongside the sexism of being Wonder Woman. Uh, this is where I chime in and I say that there's a current run of Wonder Woman written by Tom King that is doing a really good job. Obviously, it's not intersectional because she's very much a white woman in that book, but just goes to show that she's another character that, like Superman and Batman, have been resonant for almost a century, and that's why she's a little on the low side, I suppose. She was the number 2 pick, but she was the number 9 character in terms of points. I do imagine that situation will change. I think she'll be a little higher up this year, but that does remain to be seen. Kind of staying in that same general place and that same general idea. It's kind of fitting to go from Wonder Woman to Steve Rogers Captain America. Steve Rogers was the 10th scoring character and also the 10th pick, so kind of the perfect place. And that's a character that traditionally is depicted as a white man, and we can clearly see why. However, in some years, particularly I think this past year, having him be drafted by the Jewish delegation and have um, his battle against the Nazis, his battle against eugenicists, being sort of right in the forefront of the story. He's not just generically standing up for bullies, but he's actually, standing up for his people as they are, subject to a genocide. We don't have to get into all of the specifics of, why a character like Captain America being anti-genocide is so important. But if he's going to be a powerful symbol for freedom and for righteousness, having him be um, there's some there's something there for him to be something other than white. Obviously, in a previous season, we had the multiracial delegation, where their story was that he was white passing, but given his mixed background, he's still kind of everything that the Nazis, are against, but quote unquote mongrel race. So that's a lane, that's a direction for Captain America. I mean, it's obviously difficult for him to be depicted, given that he's physically very much blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan look to him, but that's you sort of take the good with the bad. What you gain in terms of making the story a little bit more interesting and a little bit more layered, you might lose in terms of finding visuals that support that race bend. And that's part of the strategy, honestly. It's part of the strategy of what we do in the racial draft, that you have to ask yourself whether being able to represent that character visually, whether you may need to use your own art or art that you've commissioned to depict it, because there's not a lot of sort of art floating around in the wild that depict him in that fashion. But either way, it all comes into play when you have drafted a character and you want that character to represent your delegation. Um, I'm not going to get too far into some of the other jokes that I made on the other podcast, the Lost episode, as it were. I think that there's one of the most difficult characters to race bend, in my opinion, would be Thor Odinson. I know it's been tried in the past. I just think that there's so much tied into his Norse mythology and the Viking imagery, and he's very tied into um, at least how Nordic whites see themselves, and it's a big step away to have him be depicted in another way. Again, it's not to say that he couldn't be, but it feels it feels a little bit hard to square off. But if they, by all means, if there's a way, I'd love to hear from the particular delegates the way to make that work. Um, we've had some cool stories in the past, some cool uh, ways to ways to square that circle. So maybe we'll get some more in the coming season. Um, you know, as the characters get drafted, I'm sure I'll have much more to say. I just wanted to kind of get back into the swing of things, get people back into the habit of listening to the racial draft. You can find us at a variety of places. You can find us on Twitter or X, but Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads, the two, the one with the words and the one with the pics. You could find us uh, on there. You can find us at racial.draft. On Twitter, I should have mentioned before, it's Racial Draft Pod. Facebook, you can find us there. You can find us on YouTube. If you're seeing us on YouTube now, like, subscribe, do all those things. Just pound that like button, get our subscriber numbers up. Um, if you're listening to just the audio, good for you. Keep on doing that. Keep on subscribing. Keep on sharing the audio podcast. But go ahead and come around to the different other places. If you want to kind of have your one-stop shop of all of the racial draft business and news and the like, go to racialdraft.com. It's a domain name that we have. And if you go there, then you can sort of be plugged in, and you can follow the old seasons. You can follow the new seasons. You can see all the art. You can see all the stories. It's all there in one place, so you don't have to do a whole bunch of searching. There's links. It's I try my best. And if you have some more ideas about how to things to add to the site, go ahead and hit me up at MTFIII on Twitter. MTF III, Michael Ford the third. What else? I think I've hit all the different places that we can be reached. Follow along. I think you're going to be getting a lot more content. So maybe it may make sense to just follow us everywhere, because there's going to be some content that's specific to the different sites. And if you want little snippets as the picks come in, you might want to check out. Oh, I should have mentioned we're also on TikTok. I believe it's Racial Draft Pod on TikTok, but don't quote me. It's either racial.draft or racial draft pod. As you can see, there's not a lot of content coming out yet, but it will. It will. We'll be getting it all. So I'll leave you with that. Happy New Year again. Happy 2024. Stay tuned into this channel. Like I said, same race time, same race channel. But until next time, I can't stop it. Until next time, all things are possible.